Carlos Walker, and this is Forward Progress. And today I'm here with Miss Toby Dorr. It is Dorr, right?
That's right.
All
Yep.
right. Miss Dorr, if you will, share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay. So my name's Toby Dorr, and in 2004, I started a prison dog program at the men's facility in Lansing, Kansas. And I'm probably best known for helping one of my dog handlers escape from prison. So that happened on February 12th of 2006. We were on the run for 12 days. And then, of course, you get caught. You always get caught. You can't get away with stuff. Caught in a high-speed car chase at 100 miles an hour, crashed head-on into a tree, and that was the end of that. I ended up doing 27 months in prison for my part in the escape. And I realized while I was in prison that I had this extraordinary gift of time, because before I went to prison, my life was so busy, I never had any time for me. And so here I am stuck in prison, and all I have is time. So I realized I could take advantage of that time and use it to really work on myself and go back and evaluate every facet of my life and my past and figure out the things I needed to heal, the things I wanted to let go of, and kind of chart a course for the future. So since I've gotten out of prison, I have written a memoir. I have.
Hold on. Before we go that far,
Yeah.
I want to break it down.
All right.
So, but what we do, we go before you went to prison, who you were,
Okay.
what life was like. Then
Yeah.
we're going to talk about the time in prison. Then what we're going to do is talk about everything
All right.
that
Awesome.
after the fact.
Perfect. So before I went to prison, everybody, including me, thought I had the perfect life. I had a corporate job. I was married to a firefighter. We had 2 sons. But the reality is that I wanted to believe so much that I had a perfect life that I presented to everyone this perfect life that really wasn't the life that I had. It wasn't a bad life. It wasn't like, my husband beat me up or drank or, none of that. It was a good, stable life, but something was missing and I just didn't know what it was. And I came to find out that it was, I didn't really have a purpose. I was just kind of taking up space in the world. And I was going to work, coming home, doing events with my sons, going on vacation. But if I died, which I was diagnosed with cancer in 2004, and I realized if I died, it would just be a blink. Nobody on earth would think, oh gosh, that Toby, she was awesome, because I hadn't done anything except just, enjoy life. And I decided I needed to do something that would make a difference. I needed to fulfill a purpose for being here. I couldn't just drift through life enjoying it any longer.
Okay, so I want to go back even further.
Okay.
Share a little bit about your childhood and what maybe life was like even then, because it leads up to.
It certainly does. Boy, I think so many things are buried in our childhood. I had a wonderful, beautiful childhood. I was the oldest of 5 kids. And when I was 5 years old, I was the oldest of 5 kids. And my dad was burned in a horrific accident in our backyard. And I saw it. And I saw him, with his skin peeling off and his hair smoking. And it was traumatic. But at the time, my mom took my dad to the hospital and he was gone for 10 months. And as a 5-year-old, that is forever. He's just gone. And back then they wouldn't let children visit people in the hospital. You had to be 14. It was such a dumb rule. And no one could convince me that my dad wasn't dead. I'd seen him burned up and he was gone. And dads don't just leave and never come back. And so my mom was gone a lot too, because she was at the hospital taking care of my dad. And so the 5 of us kids kind of got juggled from neighbor to neighbor and relative to relative. And we never knew from one day to the next who was going to be watching us the next day. And, my parents were so strong and, they did so much during that time. But for us kids, I think, we kind of felt abandoned and adrift. And so I felt like as the oldest, I needed to pick up the pieces. And so I started changing my younger sister's diapers, and I wouldn't let whoever was watching us for the day, I wouldn't let them do it, because I felt that my brothers and sisters needed some consistency in their life too.
That was your responsibility.
Yeah. And so I took on that responsibility. And then for the rest of my life, I mean, that was when I think my childhood ended, because for the rest of my life, I was the second mother to all my brothers and sisters. And I was the helpful daughter. I wanted to make things easier for my parents. And so I kind of threw away my childhood, I suppose.
What was your teen years like? Still, I'm pretty much second mama to them, but what was that like?
Okay, so my teen years, hold on. My teen years, I absolutely loved high school. And I was really popular in high school, and I didn't even realize that I was popular. I didn't try to be, but I just had so much fun. And of course, I had this personality where I wanted to do everything for everyone else. So, I became the pep club president, which in our high school was like one of the biggest jobs there was. And you planned all the pep rallies, and you got all the people there to cheer at the football games and the basketball games and whatever was going on. And I just thrived having so much to do. And I loved my teenage years. It was just so much fun.
So you, after teenage years, shed some light on your adulthood and gravitating into, I guess, what made you become, I guess, a CEO?
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I was 15, I started dating my first husband, and I never dated anyone else in high school, really. I mean, I had some boyfriends earlier, but we didn't go anywhere. We were too young to go anywhere. So really, when I first started dating, I dated my first husband, and we just never broke up because we never fought. But that kind of should have been one of my first warning signs, because you can't really have an argument if you're not passionate about something. And so we just built this life where we just kind of existed side by side, but I don't think we were really enmeshed as partners. And I think that was a big part of what I was missing in my life, but I didn't even know what it was. And so we were married for 28 years. And then I was diagnosed with cancer. We had a daughter who died at birth. And I think that kind of pushed us a little bit further apart, even because my husband decided it would be best if we never talked about her. And I needed to talk about her. And so, but I couldn't, because I didn't have anyone to talk about her with. And so, that wound kind of festered and grew. And in 2004, I was diagnosed with cancer. And that's when I decided I needed to do something to make a difference in the world. I couldn't just live this shallow life anymore. I needed to have a purpose. And so I started this prison dog program. And I knew that my program was going to save the lives of dogs. I knew I could do that. And I've been a dog rescuer my whole life. And in 18 months that I ran the program, I had rescued 1,000 dogs. That's a significant difference. What I didn't expect was the difference it would make to the inmates who are handling the dogs, because, we're social creatures, human beings. And when you're in prison, I think especially as a man, because, then I went to prison and I was in the women's prison. And it's totally different than the men's prison. But as a man, you have to be on guard in prison. And I don't think you can really share safely with someone everything. And if you don't have visitors, and a lot of my dog handlers didn't have visitors, you went through life without ever having a hug. Or and that just does something to a person. You just can't exist that way and be a human being. There's a huge hole. And so when I brought those dogs into the prison, all of a sudden these inmates had a dog that they could hug, and the dogs slept with them in their beds and went everywhere with them. And even the men who weren't dog handlers could come up in the yard and pet a dog. So these dogs were really changing the lives of all these men. And I was just not prepared for that difference. But it was significant.
It made to your point, there's a huge significance when you can find love. That's
Yes.
what they actually found was men are protectors, providers,
Yes.
these things. And when you're locked up, all of everything that you know that a man's supposed to be, you become. You
Yeah.
become the dependent upon people. And
Hmm.
this mind state, people got to send you money. People got to do everything for you.
That's right.
And it shifts your mind state
Hmm.
from independent to dependent.
Yes.
And people lose a sense of hope. But go
Yes.
ahead.
That's so true. And I think if you don't have hope, if you can't see a better future, you've got nothing. I mean, really, you've got nothing. And so bringing these dogs into the prison just made such a difference. And the whole prison staff, were just thrilled with it. And they kept asking me to bring more dogs. And finally, I eventually had 100 dog handlers and over 100 dogs inside the prison at any given time. I even put dogs in maximum custody, which I think I was the only prison dog program that did that. And it was significant.
Thank you for that. Thank you
Mhm.
for
Yeah,
seeing a reason you was helping dogs, but to be honest, you was really helping
I
people.
was helping people. I was helping people so much more than I ever helped the dogs.
Yes, it wasn't even about the dogs. In the beginning, it was, but
Yes,
if
yes.
you can just imagine how those men, I don't know if they ever send letters or anything to tell you how, I guarantee you could talk to either one of them.
Yeah,
They
and
probably
I
tell
am
you,
friends with some of them now, and it's been 20 years ago. So, the prison escape was in 2006. So this February will be 19 years since the prison escape, since I last did the prison dog program. And there's a couple of my dog handlers that I'm still friends with. And when I go, I've even had dinner with them, and they're out of prison, and I'm so proud of what they're doing with their lives. And, you know, it, it made such a difference. So I feel like I made a difference there. But, it wasn't enough. And when I found myself in prison, I realized that I needed to, dedicate the whole rest of my life to making a difference in any place that I could. And I knew men's prison very well. I mean, surprisingly, because I was inside the men's prison, I had unrestricted access to go anywhere I wanted, which kind of was weird. And I was inside the prison for probably longer in a day than the officers were who worked there. I was in there for maybe 8 or 10 hours a day in different parts of the prison, doing different things with the dogs and the men. And um, I felt like I had a pretty good understanding of what prison was like for those men. And when I went to prison as a woman, it was so different. It wasn't even the same thing. I mean, some things were better, but some things were so much worse. So, for example, in the state I was in, which was Kansas, in the men's prison, they had cable TV. In the women's prison in the state of Kansas, there was no cable TV.
hmm,
And the reason was that the women never demanded it because, if the men, I was even told at the prison I worked in that the only person on 24-hour call was the guy who ran the cable TV. Because if the cable TV went out at 2 in the morning, he
they're
needed to get
right.
it fixed because there'll be a riot.
Yes.
Right. Well, in the women's prison, women don't riot. Women
Hmm.
don't, they just go, oh, we can't have TV. Oh, okay. Darn it. I mean, we're just different. And so I found that women lacked so many things. And also, when they started putting women in prison and realized they needed separate prisons for women because they're incarcerating so many women, they've actually doubled the amount of women they've incarcerated, in the last 5 or 10 years. It's the fastest growing demographic in prison is women.
Hmm.
Um, but when they put women in prison, they just and they realized they needed a separate prison. They just kind of took a men's prison and moved the men somewhere else and moved the women in and like, okay, now we have a women's prison. Well, women don't want weight equipment. They want a crafting room or book clubs. It's just different. They want a garden. They don't want to, it's just so different. And I don't none of the women's prisons that I was in catered to the needs of women. They were all built for what worked for men, and then they just stuck women in there, and said, here it is. It works for the men, it'll work for you. But it doesn't. Women are just different.
So before we get into that part, I want to backtrack just a little bit. So I'm just going to hit on this for a quick second. The relationship and how things may have started with you and the inmate that ran away. And then what I want you to do is give me the psychological point of when you received your time. What
Okay.
was running through your mind? Because that's real big to me.
Yeah.
Understanding what people feel when they're going through this thing. Because yes, I may have done something, but it's traumatic.
Yes, it is. It's very traumatic. So first I'll start with when I met John, and John ended up being one of my dog handlers. And I met him about 6 or 7 weeks after I started the prison dog program. And he approached me in the yard, which most people didn't approach me directly. So that was different. It was kind of bold. And he told me he wanted to be one of my dog handlers because he was really good and I'd be his best dog. He would be my best dog handler. And so that was kind of intriguing. That set him apart from the rest of my dog handlers. So I told him the process. You have to fill out the paperwork and the warden has to approve it. And so he went through. And a few weeks later, I brought in some dogs they told me they had 7 new dog handlers. Could I bring in 7 new dogs? So I showed up with 7 new dogs. And generally, I just pull a dog out and I give it to someone. I say, here's your dog. And they're like, oh, thank you, Miss Toby. Thank you. Oh, I love him. He's perfect, But when John was one of these 7 new dog handlers, and I pulled up with these 7 dogs, and I'm taking these dogs out of the crates and bringing them in the prison. And John's evaluating every one of them, like looking at them and petting them. And then he gets done looking at them all and he goes, I'll take this one. And I'm like, what? That's not how this usually works. I mean, that's different, but it would intrigued me, because it set him apart from everyone else. And then he was my most difficult dog handler because he thought he knew how to train dogs. And the way he wanted to train them was correct them for everything. And no, you can't do this, and be really firm. And when he'd walk around the prison yard with his dog, that dog was perfectly behaved. And when I took it out to a dog adoption, it was the craziest dog in the whole lot because that dog had learned to mind John, but it didn't learn manners. It learned fear, and I better do this or I'm going to get in trouble. And so, I came back and I gave John his dog back. He said, you mean he wasn't adopted? And I said, no, he's a mess. He knocked everybody over that wanted to look at him. He's a mess. And John said, he's the perfect dog. And I said, you're not the perfect dog trainer. You need to start training the way I tell you. And he said,
no, that was whatchamacallit.
He said, I kind of challenged him. I said, I dare you. You use my method for a week and see what happens. And he was like, okay, I will. And at the end of the week, he came back. He said, you're right. Your method works better. And so, and then he really got bought into the prison dog program, and he went out of his way to help me get stuff set up, and he really wanted to be a part of it. And so we ended up spending more and more time together, and then things just kind of crossed a line, and I realized that was what was missing in my life, was someone who really worshiped me, kind of, I guess, who really thought I was important, who noticed things about me that no one else did. And so it kind of was like pouring water on a dying plant, and then I started coming into the prison even more because I just really enjoyed being around John, and I didn't know yet what it was. And actually, it didn't take long from the time we realized something was happening between us till we did the escape. It was only about, maybe less than 2 months. It wasn't like we were planning something for a long time. And when he first approached me, he said, would you be with me if I wasn't in prison? And I said, no, I might, that might happen. But I knew he wasn't getting out of prison because he was doing a life sentence for a felony murder case. So he didn't kill anyone, but he was involved in a crime when someone was killed, and so he got a life sentence. And that meant a lot to me. That made a difference that he didn't kill someone, but he still was in prison for life, and that just seemed wrong to me. And in fact, the new podcast that my husband and I have started is called Two Doors Down, and it's all about time, every different facet of time, but it's dedicated to ending felony murder. So, we just educate people about what felony murder is and how it's so wrong. Because when we talk to people about felony murder, most people are stunned. They don't that doesn't make sense, they say. How can you go to prison for life when you didn't kill anyone? And so we just realized if we started a podcast where we talked about different cases, we could make people more aware, and perhaps a grassroots movement would start where there was enough people, offended by felony murder that lawmakers start to listen.
Educate, because most of these laws are old, for one.
Yes, they are.
And
felony murder was invented in 12th century England. 12th century. And every country had felony murder, and they've all gotten rid of it because they thought it was inhumane and unjust. England got rid of their felony murder rule in 1957, which is the year I was born. And here we are all these years later, and we're the only country that still has felony murder.
And we are the youngest, I guess you could say, the youngest country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But still growing in some stages.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of ways, with racism, everything that you can think of. We're still growing as a country.
Yeah.
And it feels like we're lagging behind, even though we have also been the country that everybody has been watching.
Yeah, we're the country that leads in so many ways. And where we lead in incarceration is that we have more people incarcerated than any other country per capita. I mean, it is outrageous how we just throw people in prison. And really what we do in the United States, we think prison's a solution, but it's just a Band-Aid on a problem. And you really have to address the problems, the root problems. And you're not going to stop people going to prison until we fix some of those social problems.
So y'all start, and then y'all, I guess it finally happened. Y'all ended up running. You say y'all ran for 12 days?
12 days, yeah.
What was the mind state or the boldness in you to decide to say, you know what, I'm going to do this?
It got to the point where, I felt like I've lived my whole life to do for others. And this is the one time in my life I'm going to make a choice that's just for me. So it was a selfish choice, but I thought maybe I deserved a selfish choice after 50 years of taking care of everybody else.
So was it, I mean, I know you had some plans, but did you think that it was possible that y'all could get away and make it happen?
Deep down, I think I knew it couldn't, but I could convince myself that we were going to be gone and it would be just fine. Because if I hadn't convinced myself of that, I couldn't have gone through with it. And I think deep down, I knew we were going to get caught. I mean, you can't get away with anything in today's world. There's cameras everywhere. There's the internet. So somebody knows in 1 second all across the world that something's happened. It's not like 30 years ago when you had to watch the evening news and, it's just all different. So
yeah, now in 2006, it was still, I guess it wasn't cell phones where you could actually get cameras.
We had cell phones, but no smartphones. Smartphones came out while I was in prison.
Y'all could have messed around and to be honest, got away with it because y'all made it for 12 days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you could have got out the country, you would have been in the right country. You'd been good. No extra. Yeah. So anyway, after y'all get caught, you're waiting on your time. What was running through your mind?
Well, at first, I was just stunned. I was like, and John I said, they're not going to throw you in prison, Toby. They don't put people like you in prison. And it's like, well, yes, they do. And so, I let myself believe him. And, you know, when I first was arrested, I was just like stunned. I mean, we'd been in this high speed car crash and I kind of got knocked out in the car crash. I didn't break anything, but I probably had a concussion or something. And I was just kind of stunned, and the media, oh my gosh. I mean, the media, the hordes of media that chased after me everywhere I went was astounding.
You
And
became famous.
yes, yes. And the media, they only wanted to report the sensational stuff. They didn't want to report any nice things about me. And so it was really difficult to deal with that. And of course, in prison or jail, you have TV. So you see the evening news, and there I was the next day. There I was the next day. It's like, oh my gosh. So when I first got to prison, I couldn't do it. I said I can't do it. And I remember my brother's best friend was my attorney, and he came to me and he said, excuse me, he said, I'm going to ask for a 2-week continuance. So we were in court actually. And he told the judge, I need a 2-week continuance. I just first talked to my client last night. I don't know any details of the case. And I had this meltdown in court. And I said, I can't stay in prison for 2 weeks. You're crazy. I need out of here now. And I thought when I went to court that day, they'd send me home, and, that didn't happen. But I got used to being in prison, and I felt safer inside prison than I did when I was outside of prison, just because I was kind of in this cocoon. And the women's prisons are different than the men's. In the women's prisons, we love each other, and we hug each other, and we build these deep friendships. And some of the best friends I ever had were the women I had in prison. And I'm still in touch with some of them today. And, when you have nothing and you're as low as you can be, and all the women around you are in the same place, I mean, we lift each other up, and we become each other's crutches. And, I found it to be a very healing environment.
It happens in men's prisons too. They don't talk about it. Maybe not the full off hug and that.
Yeah.
But what happens is, because of the shared experience, you commit to bonds.
Yeah.
Like, even right now, I'm looking to create a fraternity out of men who have been in prison, because there's a shared experience.
Yeah.
But I'm also looking to get the women to create a sorority, because we all have a shared experience. And when you take those people and you put them together with all the knowledge, the stuff we have learned, we get to do more for a community that's different.
I love that. I just love that. Yes.
I'm working on the idea. I've been thinking about it for years, to be honest, but I'm moving towards it more now than that.
I love that. I love that. And there's still so many. I mean, felony murder is on our list of things that we want to change. The death penalty, mass incarceration, the conspiracy, drug charges, mandatory minimum. There's so many things broken, so many things that need attention. But we're picking one to start with, and that's felony murder.
You got to pick something.
Yeah.
So what was running through your mind the day that you do get sentenced?
So I thought, so you're probably familiar, but your listeners probably aren't, but there's this grid they put you in when you get arrested, and it compares your criminal history with the severity of your charge. And it's like an Excel spreadsheet, and you come down to a box, and in that box is your recommended sentence. Well, I was in the border box, which meant I had no criminal history, and my crime wasn't serious enough to justify prison time. So I was in this border box, which is a gray area. And generally people in the border box get probation. So I thought, oh, I'll get probation. I can deal with that. And then, my attorney came to me and he said, Toby, I just talked to the prosecutor, and there is so much media attention on this case that he said he cannot approve probation because the media will crucify him. And so he's going to demand some prison time. And I said, okay, well, like, 2 months, what? He said, no, 21 months. And I was like, 21 months? That's almost 2 years. I can't do 21 months. There's no way. And, and he said, Toby, you can do 21 months. It's like, no, Jim, I can't do 21 months. And we sat there and talked. And then finally I went,
I can do 21 months.
I can do 21 months. Okay, make the deal. And so I knew when I got sentenced what the sentence was going to be. But it was that whole discussion with my attorney about what it was going to be that was so devastating. And I was like, there is no way. I'm in the border box. I should get probation. And anyway, I ended up agreeing to do the 21 months. And, and I told my attorney, he said, 21 months is nothing. I said, it's nothing for you, but I swear the clocks inside the jail go slower than the ones outside. It is slow in here. 21 months is an eternity. But, I agreed to the sentence and I did it. And then, I thought, okay, 21 months, I can do this, and I kind of settled in and I was at the state prison. And then on the news in the day room, all of a sudden the women all start yelling, Miss Toby, you're on TV. And I looked up and it was like federally indicted. And it's like, what? And then I had a panic attack and they took me to medical and they almost took me to the hospital thinking I was having a heart attack, but it was a panic attack. And so then I got federally indicted for making guns available to a felon. And I got it. And so they came and got me from the state prison, took me to the federal holding, and I went through the whole federal process, and I ended up getting a 27-month federal sentence, but they ran it concurrently. So I had 6 more months added on to my sentence. But I did I did 20 months of my 27 months in federal facilities and the rest of it in the state facilities or the county jail. So yeah, it was devastating, but now that I'm past it, I think, boy, I was blessed. I see there were so many women I was in prison with who got really long sentences that weren't just, it was just crazy. Some of the things I saw.
So now we'll speak about some of the things you actually endured while you was in there. Mm-hmm. Tell me some of the things that you may have helped people with, because for me, some of the things that you learned that you use today. Because for me, I come to realize while prison doesn't change you, it's you who change you.
Yes.
It's the people that are around you that change you. Because what happens, most of the classes and the things that's taught in there is by people who was incarcerated. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It ain't like they bring a bunch of outside people and they are the ones who teaching. No, it's people who have already went through their bid for the most part, learned a bunch of information, and now they want to give it back.
Right.
So share some of the stuff.
Yeah. So I spent so much of my time in federal holding, I guess you call it. I spent 15 months there, but that was, like a jail. It's not like a prison. So there weren't really any programs. So we were all our own best friends. Mm-hmm. But we had in this facility I was in, they had a craft session, and they had this woman from the community who was a quilter, and she came in once a week and she brought fabric scraps from all of her projects and her friends' projects. And these were pieces of fabric that most crafters would have thrown away. They're scraps, but she brought them into us and we got to have crafts, and we made some of the most beautiful things. I mean, and we just lived for crafts, and we made quilts when we never had enough fabric to make a quilt, but I made, a table runner for my mom and book covers for my sisters and pillowcase covers for some family members. And, we did everything by hand. We didn't have any sewing machines, and you checked in your ID badge for a needle at the control tower. And then when your crafts was over, you turned in your needle. And if somebody didn't turn in their needle, the whole place locked down and crafts was canceled, So that never happened. We never lost a needle. But we could sit there for hours, just talking and sewing stuff together from pieces of fabric that most people, the society would have thrown away. And we made beautiful things from them. And so during that crafting time, you just go somewhere else and your head is just thinking about possibilities. And if you're lucky enough to be sitting with friends, then you can have these discussions about things you want to do different with your life. And so really, I learned that I needed to let go of some trauma in my life, like from my dad being burned, and I needed to deal with some of those things, and my daughter that died as a baby. I needed to talk about that. I needed to bring it to the front and release it. And I just realized I had all this internal work to do, and that prison was the most perfect place to do it because I didn't have any deadlines. I didn't have any projects that I had to get done on a certain time. I had no demands on my time at all. So I could use all that time on me. And it was just a perfect setting. And I told myself on days when I was really struggling, I would tell myself, there are really famous celebrities who spend lots of money to go to a Spartan spa so they can find themselves. And I didn't have to pay to come here. So, I guess I won. And I would tell myself that over and over and over, like, I should feel grateful to be here. But,
because it was therapeutic for you.
yes, it was.
It was more mind changing. So we'll move forward. Outside of the craft and the things that in the love that y'all showed one another, this is where you, I guess, crafted your life to do the work that you do.
Yes, it is. So actually, let me grab something over here. I always have this sitting here. These are my prison journals.
Okay.
And that's where all the healing began, was inside these journals. And so when I got out of prison, I had all my journals, and I've gone back through those journals and realized, I was able to kind of put a formula to the things that I did to heal myself. And then I decided, well, I could put all that stuff into a workbook. And so that's when I started writing my workbooks. And my first workbook, well, let me grab it. It's around the corner too, right here. This was the first workbook I did, and I wrote it for incarcerated women. So it was a transformational workbook for incarcerated women. And then, I had a lot of people saying to me, well, I'm not incarcerated, but I need to change. And so I kind of rebranded and I made it into this workbook. So it's still Butterflies Unleashed, and it's a transformational journey, but it's not specific to women in prison anymore. Although
because prison is a state of mind, to be honest.
Prison is a state of mind, and really the theme of my workbooks is escape your prison, because the prisons are in our mind, and the hardest prison to escape is the one in your head.
Look, this is what a battlefield is. It's not, to me, I look at prison as being, yes, while my body was locked up, my mind became free.
Yes, that's exactly right. And, I say all the time, I found my freedom behind bars. I had to go to prison to be free. And
the crazy thing is that everybody out here is prison.
Yes.
Their body have never been it. It's all here.
That's right.
And because we was taken away or voluntarily gave up some of our time to go in, what happens is our minds, while your body was locked, your mind shifted to a whole freedom perspective. Now you appreciate life and the things out here a lot better. Where people out here, they've never been where they've never been where we went. They have been to certain stages in life, like a homeless person. They deal with not having a lot. So when they do get, they understand different.
Yes.
But it's only until you find yourself in your own cocoon that you can mess around and become.
That's right.
That was just
really,
our cocoon.
Gives you the freedom to go places in your head that you never had time to go before.
Dark spots, light spots.
Yeah,
It's a little bit of everything, but
that's right.
it's how you deal with the emotions, because you can't allow yourself to become overly emotional. You have
That's
to learn the emotion
yeah.
and be able to control it.
That's
So,
true.
um, you started writing your books after prison or during? Well, no,
After
no, you started doing your journals
I
during.
had all these journals in prison, and I knew I was going to write a book.
Okay, so that was technically where you started at.
But yeah, but I didn't really start on the book officially till I was out of prison.
Okay, so now what do you do? Because to me, it great. Look, hell of a story.
Mm-hmm.
But everything comes out here with the work that you do, because work
Yes.
started there, but work evolves here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So actually my workbook, Butterflies Unleashed, This Journey of Transformation, it expanded into 3 workbooks. And here's the other 2. There's Be Unleashed, which is a story of community, and Dragonflies Unleashed, which is for women who have kind of got their stuff together and they want to help other people. So I call this the foundational series. And then I've started 2 more workbook series. One of them is a leadership series, and it's going to have Crows Unleashed, Hummingbirds Unleashed, and Owls Unleashed. And then I have a spiritual development session that or series that's based on trees. So things we can learn from the trees, because I think, God made this beautiful world out here, and we can learn from the smallest things like a butterfly or a bee. There's so many lessons to learn from them. So I try to bring people into nature, into the world, and learn the lessons that are already out there that you haven't even seen because you've been too blinded by duty and busyness and everything else. So it's really to slow down and notice what's around you.
So crazy. It's funny that you wanted butterflies. I got a book that's called The Autobiography of the Butterfly, How the Caterpillar Made It Through.
Yeah.
And it's about a butterfly telling the story of the caterpillar. So imagine yourself being the butterfly. But what did your caterpillar go through to become who you are? And basically that's what you have just shared was, yes, I messed up. I went through some ups and downs, had to deal with a bunch of stuff. But throughout the process, inside my cocoon, what happened, I was forced to look at myself, and I became to be who you are today.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
There's so many interesting things, but let me tell you something about the butterflies. There's 2 things that just blow my mind. First thing is, this caterpillar is born and its entire life is to eat and to cling. It clings on because if
very
it falls to the
destructive for a
ground,
long
it's
time.
dead. It clings. And so one day, it's eating and clinging and eating and clinging and eating and clinging. And one day it goes, now I have to let go. Not only do I have to let go, but I have to let go head first. I have to, just hang on to this leaf, and then this cocoon is built. And inside the cocoon, it isn't just that the caterpillar hides out in there and grows wings. The caterpillar dissolves into a goopy mess, and from that, a butterfly is formed.
So before that, so when it gets up there, when you said let go, it takes its whole outer body off.
Yeah.
It sheds that whole outer body, and to your point, it becomes a gooey mess inside there. But this is the crazy part, mind blowing to me. Nothing touches it.
Nothing what?
Nothing touches it. Nothing disrupts it while it's up there just sitting there. This is how God made it, where guess what? I'm gonna let you be vulnerable where you can't get away, you can't move, you can't do nothing. And I'm gonna let you sit there in the middle in the opening, and nothing's gonna touch you or disrupt while I change you, because everything that's inside you is already there. It has to be drawn out for that butterfly to become the I forgot what they call it, but the particles that's already in it, it already knows that it's a butterfly.
That's just beautiful. I love that. And if you come by a chrysalis and you can tell the butterfly's trying to come out, and it's, cracked the chrysalis
Leave it alone.
and it's trying to get out, and you think I'm going to help it, and you just help slit the chrysalis, do you know what happens?
It falls to the ground.
Well, the butterfly will live, but it can never fly, because
the body too big.
free is what gives its wings the strength to fly.
The
And
body.
that is so beautiful because it's, you can't learn someone else's lesson for them. You can't make it easier for them. That you've got to let them go through all the hard parts because that's how they can learn to fly. And there's so many lessons in these small things.
And then the next one you said, you spoke about a tree. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the midst of writing a book based on a tree now. So I was riding one day, and I looked, and it was wintertime. So what I noticed is that the trees are actually in praise mode. The
Oh,
limbs are in praise.
I
So
love that.
what I thought about was when it's, or what God gave me was when things are falling off,
Mm-hmm.
please continue to praise.
Mm-hmm.
When it's by itself, everything is falling off and it's winter, and it still never drops its limbs.
Yeah.
During spring, when things are coming back, and during its fruitful seasons, it never drops its limbs. For people, whether things are leaving, whether we are by ourselves, whether we are things are coming back, or whether we are fruitful, at some time different people will drop their arms and say, God, I no longer need you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to look, I got this now.
I
But
love that.
we're supposed to be like trees and praise God at
Mm-hmm.
all times and
Yes.
allow, no matter whether you don't have, whether you
Mm-hmm.
have, because it's a cycle. It's
Yes.
gonna come back around, but can you praise when all these seasons are happening? And if
Yeah,
you
I think
can,
that's so important. And every season has a purpose. And
man, I promise
we need to live in that season. We need to
you.
embrace what it has to offer. One really interesting thing about trees that I didn't know until the last year, trees in a forest, their roots
They
all
talk.
intermingle.
They talking.
Yeah, and if one tree's in distress and for some reason the other trees will send nutrients to its roots.
They are
It's
always
amazing.
they're in communication, and we
Yes,
just didn't see it. So
yes. It's just
back to
beautiful.
back to everything. Finish sharing the great things that you do now because people need to know.
Yeah. So
That,
I've written a memoir called Living with Conviction. Here it is. This is about going to prison. And I have this new book coming out after the first of the year. It's kind of more of an artistic type book, but it's all the thoughts I had while I was in prison, all the things I went through. And I'm working on another memoir called Beyond Conviction. That's about what I'm doing today. That's about the
mhm.
today story. Um, and I do a seminar for women called Slaying Your Shame Dragon because, I think women really struggle with shame. They let people shame them when they're not strong enough to stand up and not accept the shame. And so I do a seminar called Slaying Your Shame Dragon, which really helps people dig in and find their essence and embrace it and not let shame have any room in their life. And so I want to do I'm working on putting together a 3-day summit called the Metamorphosis Journey for Women, which I want to be an in-person summit. So I'm hoping to be able to bring that in 2025. And then I have some online programs and series that I'm working on too, so that people can find me through an online program, or they can buy the workbook and do it themselves. And so I try to make sure that I have a tool to reach anyone. And I have my 2 podcasts too. So Fierce Conversations with Toby is people who've had an experience that they've come through and learned from, and I share their stories. And then the Two Doors Down podcast is we talk about criminal justice and time. Every episode has something to do with time. We did time zones, and our next episode's time capsules. So everything's related to time. But within that story of time, we managed to bring up current criminal justice cases in the news and present a felony murder case, just to educate people about what felony murder is and why it's so wrong.
Yeah. Uh, I want to congratulate you for your change, your metamorphosis,
Thank you. Thank you.
because it's important to see people who can. I don't like to say mess up because I don't even think this was a mess up. It was part of the journey.
I think anybody who has downfalls in their life are blessed, because the only time we can learn anything is in a downfall. If your life's perfect, you're not learning anything, you're just living.
And that for me, best way to put it, if you pull a rubber band back
mm-hmm.
and you don't pull it back, but so far, it won't go far.
Yeah.
When it's pulled back far enough, it can shoot as far as it can actually reach. And this is the thing. For us who go through things, we get to show people that no matter where you're at in life, because everybody goes through something. You may not go to prison, you might not, but you're gonna go through and you can come back
Yes.
better than you ever could imagine. But
That's so true.
don't give up. Don't tap out. Don't don't allow your emotions to overtake you.
Yeah.
And if you don't, what happens is you project further because there's a logical sense that goes behind emotions. And if you can push the emotion to the side, you'll realize that this is still working out for my good.
Yeah. 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 You know, I found the biggest blessings come in the darkest places.
There we go.
Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't wish any of them out of my life. And you know, the thing, people a lot of times want to ask you, do you have any regrets? And my thought is, what good is a regret? You cannot change the past. So don't regret anything. Just move forward and use what you've learned to do something better.
And I wouldn't be me.
That's right.
I'd be somebody else.
That's
Everything.
right.
This is to your point. You can use everything in nature. Everything in nature has to go into a dark spot before it comes out to be better.
That's true.
A seed got to go into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
A piece of sand has to go into a clam's mouth to become a pearl. A diamond is actually pushed through pressure in caves. But what happens is after all of the babies got to go into the mama's stomach in order to come out. But when it comes out, it's normally the beautifulest thing that we've ever seen.
That's right.
You get diamonds from coal. You get pearls from clams or sand that goes in clams' mouths. You get babies, sperm goes in mama's stomach. Mama picks out and beautiful baby. And what happens is nature shows you, and seeds, they turn into beautiful trees that feed people.
And seeds, you know, you've seen them, they'll sprout through a parking lot. They'll find a crack and work their way out. That, you know, if you got to go through asphalt, you got to go through asphalt.
And you're going to become great. It's meant for you.
Mm-hmm.
None that everybody I've did 50, I think this is 52nd or 51, 1 or 2. Out of all the interviews I've done, people done came out to be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But people need to hear the stories. People on Capitol Hill need to hear the stories.
Yes,
they're only seeing one side.
That's right.
Look at you now. You would have been just sucking up air.
Yeah, that's right. Just a plain old person taking up space. Yeah.
But that incident, which it happened, but what happened is people get to see you and see who you've become now. So I thank you for being who you are now.
Well, thank you. And I thank you too for your journey. And I'm anxious to learn more about yours. So, you know, I'm going to have you on my podcast. We'll talk about your story.
Yes, we will. Awesome. Before we leave, I want you to do something. Give a word of wisdom for whether it's somebody in prison, out prison, whether it's somebody never been to prison, old, young. Give me a word of wisdom that will hopefully enlighten them to be the best version or whatever you would like to give them.
So, you know, one thing I think that's so important that we lose sight of is that we always think we're not enough. We always think we need to be more. But the reality is you are enough. You have inside you what it takes to be the person you're meant to be. It's already there. You don't have to go find it. You just have to set it free. So you are enough.
That's how God creates us.
So
that will be the end. And I thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you, Carlos. And I'll be in touch with you and we'll record something closer to the end of the year to be on my podcast. Excellent. All right.
My name is Carlos Walker. This is Forward Progress, and she's Miss Toby Dorr.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
Great.